The courtroom erupted in laughter the moment the judge leaned back in his chair and mocked the worn-out shoes of the man standing before him. The sound echoed off the polished wooden walls, cold and sharp, slicing through the dignity of a father who had already been stripped of almost everything else. Ronan Hale stood there in silence, his knuckles white as he clutched a stack of neatly organized documents. His jacket was faded, his tie slightly crooked, and his hands rough from years of labor. But his eyes held something the courtroom couldn't see yet, a quiet, unbreakable strength. If you believe in kindness and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Stories like this remind us that dignity doesn't come from wealth, it comes from character. It was a bright Tuesday morning in early spring, sunlight pouring through the tall courthouse windows, illuminating dust particles floating in the air like tiny witnesses to injustice. The day had started like so many others for Ronan. He had woken before dawn in the tiny apartment he shared with his 8-year-old daughter, Maris. He had packed her lunch, peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices, while gently brushing her tangled hair into 2 uneven braids. He had kissed her forehead and told her everything would be okay. But nothing had been okay for a long time. 2 years earlier, Ronan's wife had passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him alone to raise Maris while juggling 2 part-time jobs. He worked construction during the day and stocked shelves at a grocery store in the evenings. The bills piled up faster than his paychecks. When Maris developed a chronic respiratory condition requiring frequent medication, the medical expenses pushed him to the edge. Now he stood in court fighting to keep custody of his daughter after her wealthy maternal grandparents filed a petition claiming he was financially unfit to care for her. They sat across the room in tailored suits, their posture stiff with disapproval. To them, Ronan was not good enough. He was a man with calloused hands, an old pickup truck that coughed smoke, and a bank account that rarely saw 3 digits. They believed love was measured in square footage and private school tuition. The presiding judge that morning, Judge Horace Bellamy, was known for his impatience. He was a large man with a booming voice and a reputation for cutting remarks. As Ronan nervously approached the podium, Judge Bellamy adjusted his glasses and smirked. He commented on Ronan's appearance. He questioned whether someone, in those shoes, could possibly provide stability. His tone carried a condescension that rippled through the courtroom, prompting scattered chuckles from observers seated in the back. Ronan felt heat crawl up his neck. He wanted to shrink. He wanted to defend himself with anger. But instead, he took a slow breath and began presenting his evidence: school attendance records showing Maris's perfect attendance, letters from her teachers praising her kindness and academic growth, medical documentation proving he had never missed a single appointment. His voice trembled at first but grew steadier with each page he turned. He described how he spent evenings helping Maris with homework, how they read books together by the window when the apartment felt too small, how she slept with her mother's old scarf tucked under her pillow. He explained how he saved every spare dollar for her medication and how he had recently applied for a better-paying apprenticeship. The laughter had faded by then, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. But Judge Bellamy remained unimpressed. He leaned forward and delivered a comment that would later haunt him. He suggested that love alone did not pay bills. He implied that perhaps Maris would have a better life elsewhere. Ronan swallowed hard. He felt the weight of the world pressing on his shoulders. But instead of breaking, something inside him shifted. Slowly, deliberately, he reached into his worn briefcase and removed a sealed envelope. The room grew still as he handed it to the bailiff. Inside was a letter, not from a friend, not from an employer, but from the office of the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. A week earlier, Ronan had received an unexpected phone call. Years before tragedy struck his family, he had completed his law degree at night school while working full-time. He had passed the bar with exceptional scores but never pursued a high-profile career, choosing instead to support his wife's medical treatments and later dedicate himself entirely to his daughter. Unknown to many, Ronan had quietly volunteered for legal aid organizations, drafting briefs for underprivileged families and assisting in complex constitutional research. One of those cases had reached the Supreme Court. And someone had taken notice. The letter informed him that he had been nominated and confirmed, unanimously, as an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, a historic appointment that would be publicly announced later that week. The confidentiality agreement had prevented him from disclosing it until formal proceedings were complete. But today, in this courtroom, his integrity was on trial. Judge Bellamy read the letter once. Then again. His face drained of color as realization dawned. The laughter that had once filled the room now felt like a distant, shameful memory. Gasps rippled through the audience. Ronan did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply stood there, shoulders squared, eyes steady. He spoke softly, explaining that titles and wealth were never measures of parental worth. He had not revealed his achievement earlier because it had nothing to do with his ability to love his child. He had wanted the court to see him as he truly was, a father first. The power dynamic in the room shifted so dramatically it felt like the air itself had changed direction. Judge Bellamy cleared his throat repeatedly, his earlier arrogance dissolving into awkward humility. He hastily adjourned for recess. Outside in the hallway, reporters who had somehow caught wind of the revelation began gathering. Word spread like wildfire. By midday, news vans lined the courthouse steps. But inside a small waiting room, Ronan sat quietly on a metal chair, staring at his hands. They were still rough. Still calloused. Still the hands of a laborer who had carried lumber and stocked shelves. And yet, they were also the hands of a man who would soon interpret the Constitution. When proceedings resumed, the tone was different. Judge Bellamy's voice had lost its edge. He commended Ronan's dedication and reviewed the evidence with newfound seriousness. The final ruling granted Ronan full custody, citing not financial status but demonstrated commitment, stability, and emotional support as the determining factors. As Ronan stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun, he shielded his eyes against the light. The air felt warmer somehow. He spotted Maris standing beside his sister on the courthouse steps. When she saw him, she ran, small backpack bouncing, straight into his arms. He knelt to her level and held her tightly. For a moment, the cameras didn't matter. The reporters didn't matter. The Supreme Court didn't matter. All that mattered was the way she wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered that she knew he would win. That evening, back in their apartment, sunlight streamed through the thin curtains as they sat on the floor sharing takeout pizza to celebrate. Maris giggled as she tried on his old oversized blazer, pretending to be a judge. Ronan watched her with quiet tears in his eyes. The next week, the nation learned the full story. Headlines praised the humility of the newly appointed Justice Ronan Hale. Commentators highlighted how he had chosen to stand as an ordinary father before revealing extraordinary credentials. But what moved people most was not his title, it was his restraint, his dignity, and the way he never used power to intimidate. Judge Bellamy publicly apologized days later, acknowledging his bias and pledging to approach every case with renewed humility. The moment became a catalyst for conversation about fairness in family courts across the country. Ronan's life changed in ways he never expected. He moved to Washington, D.C., but kept the old pickup truck. He enrolled Maris in a good public school and continued packing her lunches every morning. Despite the grandeur of his new chambers, he kept a framed photo on his desk of the two of them sitting on the courthouse steps in the sunlight, a reminder of who he truly was. Years later, when asked during an interview about that day, Ronan said something that stayed with millions of viewers. He explained that the hardest part of being underestimated is resisting the urge to prove people wrong out of anger instead of grace. True strength, he said, is revealed not when you rise above others, but when you lift them with you. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that dignity has no price tag. Your engagement helps spread messages of hope and fairness to the world. Before we close, I want to make a special request. Comment the word grace if you believe that kindness and humility will always outshine arrogance. Because in the end, the story was never about a judge who laughed or a title that shocked a courtroom. It was about a father who refused to let humiliation define him. It was about a little girl who believed in her dad even when the world doubted him. And it was about the quiet truth that sometimes the strongest people walk into a room wearing worn-out shoes, carrying invisible crowns. On that bright spring morning, laughter tried to break a man. Instead, it revealed his greatness. And somewhere in the sunlight streaming through tall courthouse windows, justice found its heart again.